start with second unit of this subject, Introduction to Deep Learning, that is neural network. The concept of deep learning, it is entirely based on neural network. How these algorithms they are functioning. This entire thing depends on the neural network that has been created. Neural network, it is a collection of different kinds of nodes. The way we have neurons in our brain, human brain. In the very similar way, we have different nodes which are interconnected to each other for the for the processing of certain data. We take some input from a particular node, then we process that data using different processing units, and then we deliver that data using our output unit. So this whole setup, this is called the neural network. Neural network, they are the parallel computing devices, which is basically an attempt to make a computer model of the brain. The way we have the human brain, in the very similar way, we have designed this parallel computing devices. The main objective, it is to develop a system to perform various computational tasks faster than the traditional system. Why do we have designed this neural network? Earlier we had the traditional systems, but this neural networks we require for the faster processing, for the various computational tasks that we require in the field of deep learning. These tasks, they include pattern recognition, classification, approximation, optimization, and data clustering. So number of things are there in that. We have, whenever we are processing the data, we need to recognize the pattern first of all. Like we are watching, as an example we have seen earlier, we are watching certain shows. So the pattern of watching that particular show has been recognized using these machine learning algorithms. Then classification is a part of these algorithms. Approximation, optimization, and data clustering. We will discuss all these terms one by one. First, here we should understand that these are all parts of our machine learning algorithms. Artificial neural network, it is an efficient computing system where the central theme is borrowed from the analogy of biological neural network. Artificial neural network, it acquires a large collection of units that are interconnected in certain form of pattern to show the or to allow the communication between the units. We have a large collection of units and they are interconnected to in some pattern to follow the communication between them. These units, they are referred to as nodes. In our brain we call them neuron. In a very similar way we have called them nodes here. Nodes is a term that we can similarize with our neurons. These are the small processors upon which all the operations are taking place. So what is this artificial neural network? We are calling it artificial because we have created it. That is why the term artificial. Neural, because it has taken its motivation from our neurons. So that is why we are calling it neural network, because it is a collection of number of nodes. So that is why network. So that is how we can define this term artificial neural network. If we talk about the description of this network, every neuron, it is connected with other neuron through a connection link. We have seen in our earlier diagram that how these neurons, they are connected to each other. In a similar way, we have a connection link for these nodes also. Each connection link, it is associated with a weight, that is information about the input signal. That weight, it determines, it is connected with the input signal, and the summation of that will proceed forward for the processing. This is the most useful information for the neurons, that is collecting the input depending on the weight to solve a particular problem, because the weight, it usually excites or inhibits the signal that is being communicated. Each neuron, it has an internal state which is called an activation signal. Every neuron in our brain, it has an internal state which is called as the activation signal. Here also in a neural network, we have seen that we have one particular activation function. Now, the output signals which are produced after combining the inputs, then if that is above the threshold value, then they will be sent to the other nodes. We are taking certain input that is multiplied with its weight. It is then further applied to the activation function. Then we check that whether it increases above the threshold value that has been allocated of it. If yes, then that particular signal will be transferred to the next node. So that is how the functioning takes place in our neural network. If we talk about the history of neural network, that how did it originate? So this is not today's thing. This artificial neural network, this concept generated during 1940, and from that time till present it is improvising, we can say, or new and new updations are being added to these networks to get more and better results. So I have just categorized them into three parts, that how this neural network have worked during these years. Artificial network, if we say during 1940 to 1960, basically the concept of neural network, it started with the work of physiologist Warren McClough and mathematician Walter Pitts in the year 1943. They modeled a simple neural network using the electrical circuits in order to describe the other neurons, how these neurons work in our brain. So from that time, this concept of neural network originated, basically in the year 1943 by Warren McClough and Walter Pitts. Then this was followed by the development of activation function and associative memory, which was done by other scientists also. So this was a time from the year 1940 to 1960. If we talk about artificial network during 1960 to 1980, what all upgradation took place during that time? So in 1960, Rosenbelt, he proposed the backpropagation scheme. We will all talk about this backpropagation scheme in the upcoming videos. That backpropagation scheme for multiple layer of networks. Then this was followed by multi-layer perceptron by Minsky and Peppert. There were scientists known as Minsky and Peppert. They generated the concept of multi-layer perceptron. Then artificial neural network from 1980s till present. In 1985, Boltzmann machine. It was developed by Eckley, Hillen and Sosnowski. In 1988, Costco developed binary associative memory, and he also gave the concept of fuzzy logic. Do not worry about these terms like fuzzy logic, associative memory, backpropagation. These are just the terms that you have to memorize for now, and we'll discuss all these terms in detail further. So that is how the development started from 1940s till present the developments are taking place in this field of neural network. Now, talking about the architecture of neural network. Basically, in this artificial neural network, we have two types of architecture: single layer perceptron and multi-layer perceptron. Talking about the first one, that is single layer perceptron. It was the first neural network which was proposed in 1958 by Frank Rosenblatt. Here the goal was to find a linear decision function measured by the weight vector and the bias parameter. This was a single layer neural network. There were not many layers into this because this was the initial development phase. Here in 1958, Frank Rosenblatt, here the goal was just to find a linear decision function which could be measured by the weight and the bias parameter B, we can say. This is further proposed when the neural model is built. The content of the neurons, local memory, we say it contains a vector of the weight. The single vector perceptron, it is calculated by calculating the sum of the input vector multiplied by the corresponding element of the vector, with each increasing the amount of corresponding component of the vector by the weight. So that is in a single layer perceptron. How is this functioning taking place? We are talking about this for a linear function. Here we have different parameters associated with it. We have the input vector, we have the bias parameter, we have the weight, and all these things are calculated. The value that is displayed in the output is the input of the activation function now. So all these processing, they are taking place in this single layer neural network. So that is how it gets calculated. So this was the first architecture that was developed in the field of neural network. If I am saying perceptron, the term perceptron, we can relate it to neural network only. When we are talking about single layer neural network, so we can call that artificial neuron, as perceptron also. Comes a very important term, that is gradient descent. Gradient descent. It is known as one of the most commonly used optimization algorithm to train the machine learning models by means of minimizing the error between the actual and the expected result. We have some actual result of our processing, and there is a result that we are expecting our machine to deliver. So minimizing the difference between them, minimizing the difference between the actual result and the expected result, that is the main function of our optimizing algorithm. So gradient descent, it is the most commonly used optimization algorithm. And what is this optimization algorithm doing? It is minimizing the error between the actual result and the expected result. We want that what result we are expecting should be delivered from our machine, but there is some other actual result which is getting produced. So we have to minimize that difference so that our actual result and the expected result, they similarize with each other. So to minimize this difference, we have the optimization algorithm that is called as gradient descent. It is used to train the neural network. It is defined and as one of the most commonly used iterative optimization algorithm of machine learning to train the machine learning and the deep learning models. To train these models, we are using this function of gradient descent. It helps us in minimizing the local minimum of the function. If we are talking about minimizing the error, that means we are talking about the local minimum of the function. In mathematical terminology, we say that optimization algorithm, it refers to the task of minimizing or maximizing the objective function fx parameterized by x. That is what we have in the mathematical term. So in machine learning, optimization is the task of minimizing this function which is parameterized by our model. So there we are using the algorithm, optimization algorithm, which is known as gradient descent. Now let us talk about the cost function. The cost function, it is defined as a measurement of the difference or the error between the actual value and the expected value at the current position, and present in the form of a single real number. Here we are talking about this cost function. Cost function, it is defined as a measurement of difference between the actual value and the expected value. That particular thing, that is known as a cost function. It helps to increase and improve the machine learning efficiency by providing feedback to this model so that it can minimize the error and find the local or global minimum. If we're talking about one particular node, then we call it local, and if we are calculating the result for all the nodes, we can call it global. So we have to minimize this cost function. Further, it continuously iterates along the direction of the negative gradient until the cost function, it approaches to 0. We have to make sure that our cost function, it should approach to 0, so that iteration keeps on taking place along the direction of the negative gradient. At the steepest descent point, the model will stop further learning. Once this value gets achieved, this model, it will stop learning further. So the cost function, it is calculated after making a hypothesis between the initial parameter and modifying these parameters using the gradient descent algorithm over known data to reduce the cost function. So our objective here is to reduce the cost function. What is cost function? It is defined as a measurement of difference between the actual value and the expected value at any particular current position. And cost function, it is defined in the form of a real number. It helps us to increase, why we are minimizing this cost function, to increase and improve the machine learning efficiency. When we are working on this machine learning algorithm, we definitely want our machine learning algorithm to work efficiently. So for that efficient functioning, we require that our cost function, which is the difference between the actual and the expected value, it minimizes. So our function, it continuously iterates along the direction of negative gradient until our cost function, it approaches to 0. At this steepest descent point, our system, it will stop learning further. The cost function, it is calculated after making a hypothesis between the initial parameter and modifying the parameters using gradient descent algorithm over known data to reduce our cost function. So that is how we are working on this cost function.